Hello, my name is Andrew Clifford. I'm the Director of the Master of Conference Interpreting at Glendon College, and I'd like to spend the next few minutes with you talking about our aptitude test. The aptitude test here at the Master of Conference Interpreting is the exam that we use to determine whether we'll admit somebody to the MCI or also to the Graduate Diploma in General Interpreting. And we get a lot of questions about the aptitude test, so let's see if in the next few minutes we can't clear some of those up and give you a better sense of what you're going to be expected to do during the aptitude test. When we contact you to begin the process, we will ask you to book 3 different appointments with us because there are 3 steps in the aptitude testing process. To begin with, we'll bring you into the virtual classroom that you're seeing here, and we'll make sure that we have a good connection with you, that we're able to see and hear you, and that you're able to see and hear us. That will take us roughly 30 minutes to establish. On a separate occasion, we'll bring you back into the room and we'll do round 1 of the actual aptitude test. That normally lasts about 30 minutes. Finally, on a third and separate occasion, we'll bring you in to do round 2 of the aptitude test, and it takes about 60 minutes. Let me talk to you first about the connection test. First off, there are some technical requirements that have to be in place before we can proceed. To begin with, you absolutely need to have a wired connection. Some people think that they can make do with Wi-Fi, but that simply won't work for our system. You need to make sure that your computer is connected to a modem via an Ethernet cable. Also, you need to have a headset with a built-in microphone. The kind of headset that plugs into a USB connection is usually best. You need to have the headset because if you don't, then your microphone is going to pick up sound that's coming out of your speakers, and this will create an annoying echo and feedback for the other people in the room. So a headset is absolutely a must. You need to make sure that there's no other traffic on your internet connection. For example, other people in your home shouldn't be surfing the internet, and you need to stop any files, any large files that might be uploading or downloading, and thereby using up bandwidth. You need all the available bandwidth in order to have a good connection for our test. We've discovered that Firefox tends to be the best browser to use, so when it's time for the test, we'll give you a URL that you will surf to, and if you do that on Firefox, then you'll probably get the best results. When you surf to the URL, you may be prompted to upload and update Adobe Flash. Please make sure you have the most recent version of Adobe Flash ready to use with your browser. I'm going to show you now a couple of things that will happen during the connection test when you're in the room. First off, when you enter the room, you'll see the picture of me that you see now in the camera and voice pod. The camera and voice pod is this window that just moved up and that I've just moved back down again. In the bottom left of the camera and voice pod is a button, and let me click mine so that it appears the way it'll appear for you when you enter the room. When you enter the room, I'll give you permission to turn on camera and microphone, and you'll see this button that looks like a camera and a microphone together. It's down here in the lower left of the camera and voice pod where my cursor is circling. Give it a click, and your camera and microphone will come on just the way mine did now. When you're in the room, and when we can see and hear you, we'll practice turning your microphone on and off without turning off your camera. To do this, go down to the talk button that's at the bottom left of the entire screen. My cursor is circling it now. You'll see that the talk button has 3 components: a downward pointing arrow called voice options on the right, the talk button itself, which I have to hold if I want my microphone on, or the hands-free portion. If I turn this off, you'll see the talk button turns light gray, which is a signal that my microphone is off, and anyone in the room listening to me wouldn't be able to hear me. If I toggle this button again, give it a click, my microphone turns back on and anybody else in the room can hear me again. If you're having trouble making yourself heard, you can also type a message here in the chat window. So, and the chat is to the left of the screen, and you might want to just verify, can you hear me? Question mark. And there we go. You can see that the message has now been typed into the chat window. When you're in the room, we'll also ask you to change some of your settings if you're experiencing a problem. And to do that, we'll go up to the menu bar. The menu bar is where you'll see the word help and probably the word meeting as well. We'll look for manage my settings and my connection speed. From there, we'll just double check that the black dot is at DSL cable. That will help us to have a good connection. If we have a bad connection and we're not able to hear one another, I may ask you to run the audio setup wizard. Give this a click and it'll launch a wizard or a small application in the screen. Let's just follow the steps on the page. I'm going to click next to move to the next step, which is going to test my sound, whether or not I'm hearing the sound through my headphones. I'll give this a click. Oh, the sound was working well. As a matter of fact, it was quite loud. So I'm ready to move on to the next step. I can see that of the options I have for input and output devices, I've selected my USB headset, and that's the right one. So I'm ready to move on. Now I'm going to test my microphone by recording my voice for a little bit. So let me press the record button and talk into the microphone a bit. I'll stop this and play my recording back. So here I am recording. And so it looks like it picked up my voice. I'll move on to the next step. And now I'm just going to allow the microphone to pick up any background noise so that it can filter out the ambient noise and just concentrate on my voice. It's important not to talk while you're doing this, because otherwise the noise reduction will filter out your voice, and we don't want that. It looks like I've managed to make my way to the end of the audio setup wizard, so I'll click finish to return to the main room. And hopefully now any sound problems I was having will be taken care of. Let's now move on and talk a little bit about the aptitude test itself. In round 1 of the aptitude test, we will bring you into the virtual space and we'll play a speech for you in your B or your C language. A B or a C language are languages that you've learned and that are not your mother tongue or your dominant language. The speech that we play for you will be very short and it will be focused on a very general topic. People ask us very often what kind of speeches we use in round 1 of the aptitude test. So why don't we give a listen to a speech that we used in a previous year. All right, I have the speech queued up. Here's Helen Campbell, the chief examiner on our aptitude test jury. Let's hear her give a speech now for roughly 2 minutes.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which time of day it is where you are. I'm going to talk about pets and particularly owning pets as a therapy. And I'll start by saying that I am British and that many of my fellow countrymen own a pet. Usually it's a dog or it might be a cat, but some people own rather exotic animals like pythons. In fact, pythons are very fashionable at the moment. But it also costs quite a bit of money to keep the animal. You have to feed your cat or dog or indeed python. You have to take it to the vet every now and again. Yes, it costs a little bit. And of course, if you have a very large dog, as we used to have, we had a big German Shepherd, he ate a lot and cost a lot of money, though he was a wonderful joy to have. But not only are pets a joy to have, they are also actually good for your health. And it's interesting to note that there have been some studies carried out, and these studies have found out that owning an animal actually improves your physical and mental well-being. If you have a pet, it is likely that you will not suffer as much as others from migraines, headaches, back pains, for example. And also, it is true that owning a pet is a joy because it's fun to play with your dog or your cat. And in the case of dogs, it gives you exercise as well because you have to take the dog out for a walk. People say that one sleeps better as well if one has a pet. Now, I wish I had one, but I travel so much that it would be so unfair to leave a poor dog or a cat at home. But I can tell you, the day that I settle down quietly, I will certainly buy myself, I think, a Cocker Spaniel. That would suit me very well.
All right, so that gives you a sense of the kind of speech that we would ask you to give a listen to. And once you've listened to the speech, or while you're listening to it, we'll ask you to not take any notes. At the end of the speech, we'll ask you to write a 250-word summary in your A language, that is your dominant language or your mother tongue, and you'll have 20 minutes to do so. At the end of that time, we'll ask you to email the summary, your text, to interpretation@glendon.yorku.ca, and that will be the end of round 1. The exam jury will take some time to look at the summary that you've written, and if we think that you've done a good job, we'll invite you back for round 2. And in round 2, there are 3 separate tasks. Let me tell you about the first one. To begin with, we will email you a short text in your B or C language. This is normally a newspaper article or editorial that is about 500 to 700 words long, and you'll have 15 minutes to look it over. So read it carefully to make sure you understand. At the end of the 15 minutes, we'll bring you into the virtual classroom, and you'll have 2 minutes on the clock to summarize the text orally in your A language. So in task 1, we're going from a text written in your B or C to an oral summary in your A language. After task 1 comes task 2, which is an interview in both or all of your working languages. We'll ask you to answer a series of questions in each of your languages. We'll ask you to respond to each question in the language that it is asked. And be ready for the questions to get slightly more difficult as they progress. For example, in the beginning we might ask you something very straightforward. Why do you want to be an interpreter, for example? As we get towards the end, we may ask you something more challenging. One of the challenging questions from last year was this. In November 2012, Xi Jinping was selected to become the next president of China and therefore to begin his first mandate. Around the same time, Barack Obama was re-elected President of the United States. He later began a second mandate and became what some would refer to as a lame duck president. What impact do you think these two events would have on Sino-American relations? That's the kind of question we'll ask towards the end of the interview. Here we're just trying to determine whether you can speak about a range of topics comfortably and intelligently in all of your languages, whether you're reading the news in your different languages, and whether you're generally aware of current events. From here we'll move on to the final task in round 2, and this is a little bit of consecutive interpreting. We'll play you a short speech in your B language, not unlike the speech that I just played for you a moment ago. We'll ask you to listen but not to take any notes. At the end of the speech, you'll have 2 minutes to give the same content back in your A language. Imagine that you're sitting with a friend who doesn't speak your B language and asks you, what was that speech about? You'll give the same content back, but the one difference from real life is that you'll use the first person. If in the speech the speaker says I, you'll say I in the other language as well. We'll also do the consecutive in the other direction or with another language combination. So if we start off with your B language and work towards your A, we'll also move in the other direction. We'll play you a speech in your A language and ask you to give a consecutive interpretation in your B. When that comes to an end, we're at the end of Task 3, the end of Round 2, and also the end of the Aptitude Test. So if you have any questions at this point about the Master of Conference Interpreting, the Graduate Diploma in General Interpreting, or our Aptitude Test, please feel free to drop us a line at interpretation@glendon.yorku.ca. You can also take a look at our Facebook page for more information on our programs. Look for us as the Glendon School of Translation. We're also on Twitter, and you can find us there as Glendon Translate with the number 8 at the end. So that's all there is to say about the Aptitude Test. We wish you all the best of luck and look forward to hearing from you again soon.